good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining. This is the second webinar in a mini series focused on tropical soil health in the US. My name is John Winston. I work with a nonprofit organization called Winrock International. We are one of several organizations that are part of a project called Climate Smart Caribbean. And that project is led by the Caribbean Climate Hub, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a minute. Um, but I just wanted to say that as part of this Climate Smart Caribbean project, we have been facilitating what we have been calling the Caribbean Soil Health Learning Network. And it's a way of bringing people together, researchers, extension agents, and technical assistance people and farmers to share information on soil health in the US Caribbean, which is Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. The goal really is to try to ultimately help get more practices implemented on the ground that can help build soil health. But in order to do that, help address issues that are specific to tropical soil health, get more and better research results out there and connect the research to the implementation. So this webinar series is part of that, and we're very grateful to have linked with some colleagues in Hawaii and the Pacific Islands area, who you'll also hear from in a moment. And the thought is, as the two regions that are really tropical in the US, to share learning across. And so we're grateful that everyone has joined. I guess with that, I will turn it over to Bill Gould from the Caribbean Climate Hub.
Thanks, John, and hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm the director of the USDA Caribbean Climate Hub, and our mission is really to bring information about climate change that's going to help people adapt and mitigate climate change. And we're excited to be part of this soil health seminar. We really think soils are a way to buffer a lot of the extremes in moisture in soils, and really a great tool to help adapt to more extreme weather, drought, and flooding. I do want to mention a couple of logistics. We do have a translation services. There's an interpretation button. It may be along the bottom of your screen or the top. It's on the bottom on mine, and you may have to click on the button with 3 dots that says more, and there you'll see an interpretation button, and you can select English or Spanish or American Sign Language. Si quiere escuchar el programa en español, tenemos el servicio de interpretación. Hay un botón al fondo del screen donde tú puedes seleccionar interpretación, y después tú puedes seleccionar inglés o español. Si está escuchando la interpretación y tiene 2 personas hablando a la misma vez, tú puedes hacer mute al idioma original. Entonces solamente tiene la interpretación. Again, in English, if you're using the interpretation and you're hearing 2 languages, there is an option to mute the original audio there. I hope you'll take advantage of those services if they're helpful to you. And with that, I'll turn it over to India Clark. She's going to give us a little more detail about the agenda in the program this afternoon. Thanks again for joining us.
All right, thank you, Bill and John, and everyone joining us today. Aloha mai kako. My name is India Clark, and I work as our Farm and Community Engagement Coordinator at one of our local research and conservation development councils here in Hawaii. And as part of that role, I've helped coordinate kind of a similar learning network around producers and supporters, ag professionals, researchers who are passionate about, how can we really improve the properties of our soil? What are we just living with, and what can we manage better? So this initiative was supported through a cooperative agreement between our organization and NRCS Pacific Islands area. This effort began in pretty much 2021, and it built on a lot of this work that had really been pushed through in the last decade. And the intention was really to work from the bottom up with local producers and the NRCS field offices and the extension on all islands to explore if we're going to roll out some of this NRCS National Soil Health Division programming here in Hawaii, in our islands, how do we do it in a way that's most valuable for our producers? And so we focused on programming around funding, cost share funding, and more technical support around soil health lab testing. We also worked on some soil health indicators using some NRCS tools and implementing practices such as soil carbon amendments, cover cropping, crop rotation, deep tillage, and looking at how to integrate these practices into more of a management system through the structure of soil health management plans. And so, through this effort, we started to look at suites of practices that were most applicable for various specialty crops and types of operations. We were looking and working with farmers participating who were growing dryland and wetland kalo, cacao, ulu, different agroforestry combinations, in addition to those commodities, and then market garden operations with various scales. Everyone had a different perspective and a different operation. We had to look at really the production systems and crop cycles and what made sense for our tropical climates, our soils, our crops. So along with that, we started to apply some standards that were coming out of recent research on compost application rates. We looked at integrating this into nutrient management regimes and looking at basic cost benefit comparison to see, how can we help farmers make some informed decisions here. And we're currently working on developing an online platform to share some of this work. And as much as we can, we're putting this into relatable narratives and creating some videos. And I see quite a few of you who help towards all these efforts are on this call today. So it's pretty exciting that we're continuing this momentum. And that's where we really see this, is that we are all working on this and we're stronger together. So we're really honored to be invited to be part of this learning network, to hear that you have your own learning network, and together we're really having this cross learning amongst our specialty crop growers, which we hope will be featuring in the next 2 webinars. So really hearing from similar commodity groups. What are we starting to trial in each region? There's a lot that we've learned just with us organizing this event today that we're really excited to share out. And so without further ado, I'd really like to introduce our first 2 speakers. Amy and Manuel, if you don't mind, I kind of might have you introduce yourselves. You've prepared presentations for us today to really understand what cost share programming, what technical support is available at the federal level. So we're going to look at all the different types of support, with the main audience being our producers today. Our last webinar, we saw that more than half of the participants were producers. And I feel that even if we are service providers, that is our ultimate goal, is how do we improve our soils to grow better crops. Amy and Josh, I'm sorry, Amy and Manuel, if you don't mind, I'll have you both introduce yourselves, and then we'll be followed by Josh and Daniel, who will share from extension at the state level. How do they work with producers, and how do we all work together? Following that, we'll have a panel. And then we had mentioned that we are going to use a Q&A function that is available as a button at the bottom of everybody's screen. It's hard to follow everything, so you guys can chat amongst yourselves, and but the Q&A is going to allow us to post a more formal question that we'd like to pose to the panel, and we'll be able to all view that Q&A. So if you want to practice adding a question, feel free. We're going to hold our questions until the panel, but if one comes up, feel free to use that button at the bottom of your screen to post a question that we can all see. I'm sure your questions are shared by all. So mahalo once again, and I'll pass over the mic to Manuel.
Thank you, India. I'm gonna let Amy to present herself first. So Amy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Manuel. I'm Amy Koch. I am the state soil scientist for the Pacific Islands area. for the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. So we cover the state of Hawaii, the territories of American Samoa and Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, as well as the freely associated states of Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. I've been in Hawaii since 2005 as a soil scientist. So started doing soil mapping and then evolved into, soil health really took off around 2014, 2016. And I've been involved kind of from the very beginning. So it's been really exciting to see how things have evolved and changed and how many different things are going on, but yet how much work we still have left to do to kind of continue. So with that, I will turn it over to Manuel, and then we'll look forward to giving you a presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Amy. I'm Manuel Matos Rodriguez. I'm the state soil scientist for Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. I have been working as a soil scientist for 21, 22 years. Had the luxury to work in different places, starting my career in North Dakota, then work in different states, Minnesota, Wyoming, Florida, and then ended in Puerto Rico. Here I have been since 2012, and we also in the Caribbean, it's very diverse. Our operation, technical soil services, wetlands, and of course, soil health. So here today, we would like to present to you some of the technical and financial assistance and opportunities, and hopefully we can steer the conversation to talk a little more of how we can join efforts. One thing I have learned as with my leadership position is, how we can leverage partnerships. As an agency, we cannot do it alone. And that was since in the agency's conception. Since our conception, we have been working with partners and in the different sectors. So let me advance. You can see my screen, right?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, so before we start talking about soil health, I want to talk quickly about what is the agency? What is the USDA-NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service? And what is our mission? So basically, NRCS provides conservation solutions so farmers can protect their natural resources and feed, in our case, our islands. We work hand in hand with our communities to protect and improve the soil, the health of our soil, water, air, plants, animals, and people. We call that SWAPA. Let me activate this. And our vision, we want a world of clean and abundant water, again, healthy soils, resilient landscapes, and a thriving agricultural communities. How we integrate our services so the communities can benefit through it, and through very important voluntary conservation. We're not an enforcement agency, and basically our producers are the backbone of the agency. Now, our main product, it's a conservation plan for your farm. That's basically what we do. And how we do it, we meet with producers, we talk with them, we visit about what are their specific needs and goals through a 9-step planning process. This is very important because it's a process that it's a structure in the way where we have these 9 steps that are divided in 3 phases. The first phase being collection and analysis, a second phase of decision support, and a third phase of application and evaluation. And basically, as I mentioned, we need to listen to what our producers needs and what are their goals. And then in that process, we visit their farms and to identify what are those resource concerns? What are those things that we can, we can work and see as opportunities to identify these specific conservation practices to mitigate this. Now, how do we build and how would we relate these to the soil health? And it goes back to basics. We try to simplify it and put it in perspective, those 9 steps of conservation planning, incorporating the 4 principles of soil health. And probably most of you are familiarized that are minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, maximizing living roots, very important, and maximizing the diversity. I'm not gonna spend too much time on those as we wanna talk more about. We use these principles as a guide to identify what are those opportunities for conservation, opportunities for incorporating soil health related conservation practices and and basically in the process required by NRCS, we must measure and document the presence of these resource concerns that I mentioned. So how do we, as we think about the principles in soil health, and also the planning process, we go measure what are those, or look what are those resource concerns, and look for those specific opportunities where and how I can cover my soils in the process, keep the soil, minimize the disturbance, maximize these living roots, and also through maximizing also the diversity. For that, we use tools like the infield soil health assessment. This tool has 11 indicators designed to be used as a diagnostic tool to help conservation planners in a qualitatively way to determine and document the presence or absence of these, in this case, soil health related resource concerns. And these are compaction, soil organic matter depletion, aggregates instability, and soil organism habitat loss or degradation. It's important to mention this because this is my justification, not only to provide the technical assistance, but also to provide this financial assistance that Amy is gonna be talking in a few more slides. It's very important as I digress from the principles, I identify in this management system these different practices that I can put in this, that depending on the phase of this agriculture management system, it is very important to recognize that if we wanna target and move along and promote soil health, we cannot think about a soil practice. We need to see this as a system, right? As a management system. Then we need to also, very important, recognize the complexity of these different agriculture systems. If it's cropland, if it's forest land, if it's pasture land, and what are those stages, right? So I can incorporate these different soil health related conservation practices to target these different or not target, but to fulfill these different 4 principles. So I'm gonna pass it on to Amy so she can continue with the presentation.
All right, thank you. So yeah, so to build on what Manuel talked about with the concept of a soil health management system. So instead of just taking individual practices that apply the different principles, we want to go ahead and build that system. And it's important to note that it's not going to be a cookie cutter, one size fits all. And this is something we'll kind of address later in challenges that sometimes we find in the Caribbean area as well as the Pacific Islands area when we have a national framework that's maybe developed for the Midwest. How do we take that and adopt it to something that's going to work for us? But above that, we also want to make sure that we're addressing the resource concerns that we identify on the land, as well as the producer objectives. We don't want to go and tell them to do a bunch of different practices that potentially could not have that cost benefit analysis or cost benefit in the favor of the producer. And we want our producers to be successful both in the short term and the long term. So that's kind of building these systems through various different practices. So I have here a couple different examples of what we may consider a tropical crop scenario that addresses soil health practices. So some of the different cropping systems we have in both areas, one would be kind of what we would call an annually tilled crop, row and truck crops. So that could be ginger, sweet potato, various herbs, vegetables, greens, all of those things. And so some of the different practices that you may see that are soil health related could be conservation crop rotation, cover crop. So what does that mean? That means using different, instead of just planting the same crop over and over again, doing a crop rotation. So you're accessing different nutrients from the soil, you're not depleting the soil, but then also having a rest period where you bring that cover crop in to maybe have some added benefits. Residue and tillage management, and then soil carbon amendment. We can talk a little bit more about that, I think, in the next slide, but this is different kinds of things besides just your typical mulch. So this would be compost of various kinds, maybe even macadamia nuts here in Hawaii, coconut husk, biochar is one of the big things right now that's part of that people are interested in. And then nutrient management, that's kind of the fallback. We've had that one a long time, but it's very important to make sure that everything is in balance as far as the nutrients in the soil go. And then for orchards, which thank you, Manuel. Orchards are also very common in both areas, coffee being one of our biggest exports and products, as well as macadamia nuts in Hawaii and various tropical fruits, which we all love. So some examples here could be conservation cover. So different than a cover crop, a conservation cover is going to be a long-term cover. So perennial peanut is an example that's often used to establish something that is going to be there, versus a cover crop is something that's going to be a short-term crop. Then there's always mulching and nutrient management. So an example here for the orchards would be, if you kind of the short-term objective of kind of enhancing soil health would be, all right, let's just add mulch. That's going to put organic matter back into the system and kind of give a boost to our coffee trees. But if you continue doing that over time, that mulch, especially in our tropical environments, is going to continue to break down. And so it's going to be a continuous system. Whereas if you're looking more at the long-term objectives of building this soil health management system, then you would want to maybe add in, after you do the mulch, a conservation cover. So then your soil is going to be covered all the time. You're going to have live roots, and you're going to get more benefit from having that conservation cover versus the mulch, which is going to be kind of a continuous input. Here at the bottom, and I believe people will get a copy of these slides and links, are links to what is called our field office technical guide. And so for both areas. And so this is, you see the numbers that are listed after each of those practices. So we have different practice standards. So when you come to us and you get a conservation plan, or even sometimes when you're working through other programs, you may still want, or be held to meeting our practice standards. And so it's important, this is all publicly accessible. If you want to take a look and kind of see the nitty gritty and really kind of the deep down of what each of these practices actually entails, that's what the practice standards would tell you. All right, next slide. And so also wanted to touch, those were the different typical practices, we also have some kind of newer, what we're calling conservation activities. So conservation planning activities, or CPAs. One of the things that's been very hot topic for this is the soil health management plans. And then we also have conservation evaluation and monitoring activities, or CEMAs. And one of the really popular soil health for this is soil health testing. And you can see there's two numbers. So there's also numbers associated with that, similar to our practices. And so we can talk a little bit more about kind of the status of that, I think, when we get into the panel discussion. Next slide. So we talked about kind of the technical aspect and what the different practices are that adhere to the soil health principles, building that management system. Now, how are you going to do it? There is financial assistance that can be available for conservation planning. Our most common avenue for direct NRCS assistance, where you're working with your local field office to build a conservation plan and then get financial assistance to apply those practices, again, to our standards. Those would be the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP. That's one that's definitely addressing resource concerns, versus the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP. This is one that's really taken off, at least in PIA for the last few years, of kind of like, hey, you're already doing a really great job and you're implementing all these great practices, and we want you to keep doing that. So here's an incentive payment to continue that and maybe do a few enhancement practices that are going to make things even better. We have the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which is more of a kind of a area-wide approach to, for example, soil health. Could be something that a local partner goes in to try to apply for the funding, and then that funding would then be disseminated out to producers in a particular area, meeting particular criteria to implement different practices. Then we have technical service providers. So this is kind of a different avenue. This would be for people who want to, for example, help a producer as a technical lead in soil health, for example, such as for a soil health management plan. That's something that a producer can work with a technical service provider as well as us. We would provide the funding to the producer. That producer would then pay a technical service provider to write a soil health management plan. If there's more questions about that, we can address that in the Q&A. We always have our conservation technical assistance. This is not financial, but just making, sometimes people just need a little extra, hey, how do we do this? Can you just help us put us on the right path and show us what these practice standards really mean? So sometimes that's a better fit for folks that don't want to participate in our financial assistance. There's also opportunities for conservation innovation grants, or CIG. These can be both nationwide and local, as well as other local cooperative agreement opportunities. And then Manuel, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And if you wanted to just speak briefly about the Caribbean partners, and then I think we are to our last slide after that.
Yeah, Caribbean area as other cooperative agreement opportunities, we created a local RFO called the Caribbean Partners for Conservation, where we have different topics or priorities. And basically one of them, of course, is soil health. And it's a additional funding opportunity that doesn't need to have that innovation kind of tag to it. And people can use it, or it could be academia, it could be nonprofit organizations, or to advance the validation and in the different topics, especially soil health. And we have like 2 or 3 agreements right now that are actively going for Puerto Rico and US Virgin Islands. And like Amy said, this is our last slide, and this is our contact information. But like what she mentioned, this is gonna be provided. If you don't capture it now, you can access through the presentation. And thank the Soil Health Learning Network for this unique opportunity to present to you today.
Thanks very much, Manuel and Amy. I really appreciate the cooperation and collaboration among you two to present us the big picture and then get into the nitty-gritty about the different programs and practices and avenues. Really helpful. In terms of introducing our panelists from their respective extension services, India, would you do that, or kick that part off and ask them to introduce themselves?
Yes. So, I have had the privilege to work very closely with Josh over the years. So I'm pretty familiar with the service that Extension offers and how closely they work with our producers, how much they're aware of really the practical needs on the ground, and also able to take the university trials and really help us validate in these different operations what works. I unfortunately have not worked with you very much, Daniel, and if you could introduce yourself and kick us off, that would be great. And then also, as much as we can share, we'll explore this a little more in the panel, but how we work with NRCS as well, which they explained how they do a lot more comprehensive whole farm planning, and how they depend largely on, some of the standards and trials and everything that you guys are doing on the ground. So mahalo for all the work that you're doing, and we'll kick it off with you, Daniel.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. My name is Daniel Baer. I am the soil specialist here in the Agricultural Extension Service here at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez. I'm originally from California, and we recently moved out here in 2018. And so I've been working here at the university since that time. And so we really enjoy our time here in Puerto Rico and the opportunities that we have to both teach, learn, and grow. I would like to share with you some of the extension activities that we've been doing here in Puerto Rico, as we've been providing support through training the agricultural agents and also direct interaction with and support for the farmers as those are interested in improving soil properties. So there are two projects that I'd like to share with you. The first one is soil nutrient management in tropical soils. This one was funded by Sustainable Agricultural Research and Extension, SARE, in the southern region. The Agricultural Extension Service here in Puerto Rico was a time without a soil specialist. And so when I first came in, it was the opportunity to both get to know the area, get to know the agricultural agents, and provide some training and re-education or refreshing on soil management. 1 second. The objective of this project was to provide the training to soil nutrient management to agricultural agents of the Extension Service in Puerto Rico. And there was two parts to the training. There was an in-class training, analysis, interpretation of soils in Puerto Rico, that we went over soil sampling, laboratory analysis, interpretation, and fertilizer recommendations. And then we had a field component that was both in the field and in the laboratory, that we called Integrating Soil Knowledge from the Field to the Laboratory, that involved soil formation factors, soil profile characterization, and soil analysis methods. And again, we provided this to all the agricultural agents across the island. At that time, we had 5 regions, and so we did it individually with the 5 regions. And you can see the pictures both on the top where we were in the field looking at a soil profile with the agricultural agents here in the area that was covered Mayagüez and or the west side of the island. And then also a picture of the agents as we were doing stuff in the lab. Here are some additional pictures of the activities that we did with them. We called this project Soilversity, essentially the university aspect of teaching about soils. As part of this project also, we started a podcast called La Tierra Habla, or The Earth Speaks. And this was conducted, as you saw in the previous pictures too, we had student involvement both in working in the lab, showing the lab methods. We also had them involved in the creation of some of the educational parts of this project. And some of the episodes that they worked on were about soil profile, soil chemistry. We have a company that started making biochar here on the island, one of the first. And so we spoke to them about biochar. We also did an episode with NRCS. You see Manuel Matos there in the picture on the bottom right, where we talked about soil health with NRCS, and then also about growing vegetables in a high tunnel that was recently constructed in Gurabo on the east side of the island. And the impact, well, we had a 40% increase from 2022 to 2023 in technical support provided to farmers on improving soil nutrient and health management. So it really did have a boost in the activity that was happening with soils and soil health. As part of this project too, this is ongoing, so we're continuing to work on this, is the development of a web application calculator, something that can be used in the website, and also an app that can be used on a phone or tablet. We have finished the lime application portion of it, but now we're working on the fertilizer application. The other project that I mentioned is called Rehabilitation of Disturbed Urban Soils for Vegetable Production in Tropical Regions. This is with USDA-NRCS. This is part of a new program, or a newer program that they have, that's rapid response to extreme weather events. And this is connected with the extreme weather events that we continuously have here in Puerto Rico, specifically hurricanes Irma and Maria, and more recently Hurricane Fiona. And the problems that these extreme weather events have on food supply chains, and how it can exacerbate food insecurity. And these problems typically manifest themselves greater in the urban areas because of the number of people and access to the food in those areas. And so part of this project is to encourage urban ag, both through home gardening and or community gardens. And part of the problem that we have with the hurricanes is the excess, after the hurricane has gone through, is the excess amount of vegetative wood material or tree debris, and what to do with that material. Usually it's put into the landfills, and we're looking to use it in other ways, and that's where the idea of biochar comes in. Also, the issue with urban agriculture is the possibility of greater exposure to contaminants in urban soils, and so we're looking to see how the biochar might affect absorption and exposure of these contaminants in these soils. We've been doing field trials in our 3 urban areas, which are San Juan, Ponce, and Mayagüez, with biochar, and the biochar that is being produced here, which is bamboo. But we're continuing to do experiments with other typical tree materials here in Puerto Rico. And then the extension part, where we've been having demonstration plots and field days in these main 3 areas, so that people can come, both community and extension, those interested to come over and see how these things can be incorporated. And well, those are some of the activities that we're having, and as we work with agricultural agents and both the producers, farmers, and community here in Puerto Rico.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Should we turn it over to Josh Silva now? Can you introduce yourself and go ahead with your presentation?
Of course, yeah, and great job, Daniel. That was cool. So yeah, aloha everybody. My name is Joshua Silva. I'm a associate extension agent with the University of Hawaii. Their cooperative extension based on the island of Oahu. So it's good to see in the chat some people were doing shout outs from where they were on Oahu and other places in Hawaii. So but yeah, welcome everyone from all over where you may be. So just wanted to share a couple of practices that we've been doing with on-farm trials for projects. One that was funded by CIG, and another one that was funded by Western SARE. So, and I just wanted to acknowledge some of the contributors, and a lot of them are the PIs of the projects, but We also, put all our resources together for these projects and trials, and that's what we're presenting today. So first one is compost addition at this on-farm trial. So a lot of farmers, they may read about these practices that we recommend or that we do for soil health and soil nutrient management, but a lot of them, they may be slow to start unless they see it on their farm first. So luckily through the CIG project and grant, we're able to do this for some participating on-farm trials. So this is one on the west side of Oahu and Waianae, where we basically just applied 2 big rates of compost applications. So 20 tons, and then another one was 40 tons per acre. So this is the 40 ton per acre field, and just wanted to say, remember where this this irrigation pipe is, because it'll come up in a couple slides. Okay, so we applied this, it tilled it in, and we've been doing this trial for about 2 to 3 years now, and getting some good data. So the core of the data is going to be the soil health score. So Dr. Jonathan Dienick and Susan Crow and their labs, they've created this soil health index, where it's about 11 or 12 different soil tests, physical, chemical, biological, and they, through their math and things that go past my head, but they've created this soil index score to gauge how healthy a soil is or can become with these practices. So with those measurements, the 20 ton per acre rate, we took baseline samples for those treated and untreated plots, and steadily the composted area, it's slowly climbing. So it's still kind of early on, and we'll see what the trial results show for this year and the upcoming year, and we'll see how long we can do it with the farm too. But it's slowly increasing, which is good to see, especially since this 20 ton per acre rate is typically what we've recommended for farmers in the past. But what we was kind of more interested to see was, with that exceptionally high 40 ton per acre rate, we saw a drastic increase in soil health immediately. So this one we started at a later date. So we did it one round, and then just by the second round, we were already seeing a huge increase in soil health score. But we would hope to see some kind of increase in yield too, but so far for all of our rounds of harvest and data collection, there haven't been any significant increases in green onion yield yet. So just some key benefits from the compost applications is one, at least for a short term, it improved general soil health measurements, including soil carbon, microbial respiration and activity, and also water retention. So you can kind of see here, remember that irrigation pipe I showed in the first slide? This, where my foot is, that's the untreated section. And is when we're collecting soil samples, you could visibly, and even when you step on top of it, see the difference with the compost, 40 ton per acre compost additions, where the grower, or this might be right before harvest, where they were cutting off the irrigation, and this side where my foot is, the untreated, was kind of bone dry, but that water retention was significantly there for the 40 ton per acre rate. So maybe this can help with irrigation management, which is a future project that's coming up. But for some limitations that we've encountered were just primarily the high costs associated with adding compost and also the labor. So the compost costs about, for 20 tons, like about 2,700 for the compost itself, plus the delivery, which oftentimes gets our growers. And with that delivery fee, if they don't know somebody that owns a big truck and they can, haul it in their way from wherever they're going to be working during the daytime, oftentimes because of that delivery fee, farmers won't do that practice. Additionally, if farmers don't have some kind of way to mechanize application of the compost, they won't do it also. So I'll show that on the next slide. So the farmer that we worked with, he had this conventional compost spreader. It's very old, but basically you load it on the top, and it, there's a agitator inside that helps to shift it down so you can apply it in one way. But the thing is, there aren't that many equipment that meet the needs of our farm, our small size farms here in Hawaii. So something like this would be perfect, but nobody makes it this size anymore. As well as the type of model it is, the farmer, there's still a lot of labor involved where the farmer would have to hop off the tractor, get into a bucket loader, scoop it in here, hop off the bucket loader, hop back onto the tractor to spread, and they might have to do maybe 5-6 trips of that. And it can be take a lot of time even with this mechanization. So one thing that we're hopeful to, somehow do in the future, and it's one of these topics of what farmers value is mechanization. So there are some advanced things like self-loading compost spreaders out there that with the right schematics, and if you have an engineering department, they could build something like this that scoops up the compost itself with the same implement, and then with hydraulics it pops right up back up, and you can spread it all on the same vehicle, so you won't have to get off. So it can save a lot of time. So that's one thing that's hopeful in the future, that can maybe increase the efficiency of adding compost and then therefore the adoption of it. So because of the compost limitations for the farmer, he also wanted to try cover cropping. So we chose to do cowpea cover cropping. And through the project, luckily, we were able to purchase seeders, which helped greatly in applying it on the field. And you can see him inspecting it, and he's been very, very happy with this, especially. So we're still in the process of taking soil health measurements, because we just implemented this practice for the trial this year. But it's kind of funny because this particular farmer, when I first started this extension position about 6 years ago, he never believed 1 ounce in cover crops. But through this project and just trialing it, he saw the great benefit, and now we converted him to the cover crop side now. And partly, and part of that reason too is because of the economics. So far, like I said, the compost application on the bottom, it's very, very high cost. So $2,700 for the compost itself, and then there's also the labor cost to apply it. But for the cowpea rate that he used for this trial, and with the labor of the using the seeder and then just the minimum amount of irrigation for it, it's what is it, 1/3 the cost just to do this cover crop application compared to compost. So he does lose time in terms of compost. He can add it quickly and then put in your crops soon after, while the cover crop takes about like a month and a half to grow. But because his part of his practice is he leaves some fields fallow, and he's able to rotate fields for his production, it works very greatly for his operation. Another one that we're highlighting for soil health practices, just wanted to do a shout out that there's another colleague of mine that he has a CIG project for biochar. So he's currently doing that, but I think we still getting data, so I wasn't able to present it. But one thing that that same colleague of mine and all of us, we have a project for Western Sierra, is analyzing more of this liquid blood bone meal. So on the island of Oahu, there's a company who takes a lot of the fish and livestock waste from rendering plants, and they get it together, they cook it up, and they make this nice, wonderful, nutrient-rich bone and blood meal that is kind of nicknamed tankage. So it's a 1031, and we've done trials in the past that's shown that applied either as a dry, like in this dry form, or either as a tea, which I'll show on the next slide, you get very similar or even better yields compared to like a synthetic product at the same rate. So one thing that we're currently looking at, one of my other colleagues, he has an engineering mind and created this setup with like basically the idea of compost tea, but making it with this bone meal, where we brew it in a 250cc tote, and then we pump it in through a settler, and then through a metallofilter, where that different sponges have high surface area that can help with mineralization of the organic nitrogen source, and that pumps it out to the field. So we get kind of high nitrate concentrations from this, where it's sufficient to feed a crop. So in this top picture is a field of taro or kalo we have here in Hawaii with different varieties, and they all grew very nicely. You can see no signs of chlorosis or nitrogen deficiency. So it was very good. And then the minimum soil health measurements that we did was at least soil carbon. And I think they're now starting to take more measurements on it. But when this field first started and was managed more conventionally, the soil C was about 1.3%, but currently after doing this practice regularly, it climbed to at least like 2 and I want to say even close to 2.5% soil carbon just from this practice alone. So just another way that we're trying to get these nutrient practices to our farmers that also have soil health benefits, either for short-term crops or longer-term crops, because the taro is like about 8 to 12 months depending, or even orchard fields. That's our hope. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, I think we'll answer questions later.
Mahalo, Josh. Each of you presented some very interesting updates, not only, the programming that's available, but applications. And Daniel, wow, so many great programs going on. Josh, you really helped us dig into looking at behind the scenes of how we're developing research that we can then use to guide a lot of the work that Amy and Manuel talked about. So, you guys have both talked about how there is standards and guidelines in those practices. And unless we have those, unless we know we've got a 20 ton per acre application, right, or 40 tons an acre, we don't really know how to implement these practices. And then how do we do it for different specialty crops? Thank you all for joining us. We've had amazing presentations, beautiful photos. I think we really have a sense of some of the work that's going on in each region. And we do have some collaboration going on already with our national CIG between Hawaii and Puerto Rico. We are doing these on-farm trials, some of which Josh just presented to you. We may have time for at least one panel question. We have also monitored the Q&A. We'll be answering all of these Q&A questions over the webinar series and given these to all of our attendees. The question from the Q&A was really focused on some of our main pests right now, which is CRB. I also see a question again regarding the compost, but to go a little higher up on one panel question that we had prepared, I'd really like to pose to our panel, what do you really see is the benefit of working with a producer on a suite of practices, on approaching that management system rather than an individual practice? And especially for us here in our tropical regions with our specialty crops, how might this look? Can I pose this to the group? And Manuel, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you'd mentioned how you're starting to look at suites of practices that make the most sense for different crops. That is some of the work we've stumbled upon, but we've not really formalized. So I really was wondering where you're at with that. Yeah.
Yeah, through we call it RMS or resource management system, looking at that structure, there's an opportunity to, expedite the process and technical assistance, and also internally to move on in the conservation plans is to put together these different systems like that you have this set of practices that either for validation or historically that has worked. I don't know if you recall, but in the last meeting we had Dr. Sotomayor, I think, mention about that one practice will not do it. How we can maximize the number of practices and at least have a set that we know will work together. And there's an effort to build in these planning guides for tropical crops that we're putting some effort and also coordinating with our regional soil health specialist to see if we can provide this information to our planners so they can expedite the technical assistance. And I'm gonna leave it there. There's other things that need to happen, but I will leave other panelists to talk about other things.
If I could just mention, I appreciate what Josh was showing in the conversion of that farmer to cover crops. The idea, I think people look at soil as just a medium for growth and not the system that it is. And so when you have all these different practices that you can put together, you have a more holistic approach and allowing the system to grow together. And if you're able to do that, the long-term viability of that system improving increases and so on. It's important that we are able to look at all these different things, practices that may that will improve that system altogether, and then improve overall over a longer term the health of the soil.
I just want to mention that there's a question in the chat asking, can we hear more about the efficacy of biochar in Hawaii agriculture? And given that we're almost out of time, I guess I'd like to say that for that and several of the other questions, what India and I will do is try to get answers from the panelists and maybe some other resources. And India, what's the mechanism? Will we be able to post them in a way that all of the registered participants will be able to access?
You know, a big part of these webinars is not to offer a one-off, but to create momentum and relationship and dialogue. And so really the follow-up is the gold. And so we plan to collect all these questions and all the chat and over the whole webinar series, and then pose these back to our speakers so we can create even more dialogue with each other and have everyone answer these together. And that's going to give us a real pulse on where are we wanting to work and what are the big needs and questions out there. So we were thinking about being able to deliver these to those who have registered. And so this would go out on an email. And I think we could also, on our website with Oahu RC&D, we're posting the webinar recordings. And I believe at the Climate Hub in the Caribbean, you're doing the same on your tube station. And we have some narrative around there that we'd like to develop. So these are ways that, you know, we'll be able to continue the dialogue and also, you know, pose all of these questions about the efficiency of biochar and bone meal, and what's being done in Hawaii and Puerto Rico. There's so much dialogue here, and you know, we have such a short time in a 1 hour window. Our next webinar, we're really gonna have more of a focus from the producer speaking out, and those are kind of on the other end of the CIG grant. So those farmers who have been kind of in those pictures that you showed, Josh. So hearing from some of those farmers. And, you know, we really are looking at those suites of practices and where can we save costs. So again, we're looking at organic fertilizers and, you know, ways to use composting that is available. So low cost, high impact practices that make sense for us in our tropical regions with our high organic matter depletion, with all of our different crops. So this is what we're really trying to create here is, you know, understanding what works best for us. And to give a very long-winded question, and mahalo for everyone who's joined, we are really valuing everything that you're putting in the chat in the Q&A, and we will be following up at the end of, I believe, all these webinar series. You'll be able to see the topics and the questions under each, and then we'll have these posted on our website.
And speaking of the remaining 3 webinars in the mini series, the dates are January 9th. They're all Thursdays at the same time slot, 4 p.m. Atlantic, 10 a.m. Hawaii Standard. January 9th, January 23rd, and February 6th. Is that right, India? February 6th?
I believe so. And
Whatever
it's on
that
our
Thursday
flyer.
is.
Yes, it's on our flyer. And you can register the same link that you used to register today. You can register for all of the webinars at the same time. And we've got an excellent team that's been working hard to make all of this happen. So we really want to thank all of those people behind the scenes today. Yes.
And just wanted to say that we're trying to capture information from participants in the registration process. We had a little bit of a technical glitch in capturing that in time, but I will also say that if you're on this, you've probably received an email from me, John Winston, or from India, or both. And if you have thoughts about what would be most valuable to you in terms of this webinar series or future webinar series or other things related to tropical soil health, please let us know, because it is about building some future collaboration. With that, should we thank the panelists, all four of them, very much for really great presentations, both from the USDA-NRCS side and from the extension side. And we hope that everybody will be able to join us on January 9th and the 23rd and February 6th. And wishing everybody a really wonderful, happy holiday season, and look forward to seeing and talking with you in 2025. Any other final comments or thoughts?
Yep, I'd like to thank all the participants for your time and attention. Thanks to the panelists for preparing and presenting their great material. And I also would like to wish happy holidays to everyone and enjoy the festivities. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.